And we are live. I am Cate Luzio, founder and CEO of Luminary and host of Goaldigger, Finding Your Voice here on LinkedIn Live. And I'm so excited. It's Friday. It's actually sunny out, and we're in the midst of a nice warm spring. Well, today's not that warm, and I have an amazing Luminary member, business owner, founder, entrepreneur, everything, Dr. Nicola Nice, who is the co-founder and CEO of my favorite gin liquor brand, Pomp and Whimsy. So welcome, Nicola.
Good morning, Kate. How are you?
I'm good. And actually, we have to be very full disclosure. Nicola is actually sitting at Luminary, but on our rooftop lounge, the glass ceiling, which, by the way, is opening next Friday, April 30th. So if you're in the New York area, we are open next Friday as finally a full restaurant and bar and lounge. So, Nicola, it's great to have you. We're going to get into a little bit about your story and the why of what you're doing. But let's start before the whole Pomp and Whimsy journey. If you could just give a little bit of background on, where you came from and lead right into why you started this incredible company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from the UK, and I've been in New York since 2007. I'm a sociologist by training, so I've spent my career, the last 20 years plus, in the field of consumer insights and brand strategy. So what brought me to the US in 2007 was a job I had at the time, working for a UK-based research company who wanted to start a North American operation. And at the time, I was young, free, and single. And when I was told that this was going to be based in New York, I absolutely leapt at the chance, jumped on the plane, and didn't really look back. So my first year here was very much about starting this office, building clients, building out employees and a culture. And then within a year, crisis struck the first time around, and we all remember what happened in 2008. But the parent company did not survive that economic crisis. So I was in a position where I had started this business. It was successful. It was growing. And more to the point, I was happy where I was and was not in any hurry to go home. So I found a very good lawyer who helped me engineer a reverse merger of the North American business. And we were talking about this earlier, but I became a small business owner. Now we might call founder and entrepreneur overnight. So that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. The first foray was accidental. The second, however, was not. The second was very purposeful. So as I was building that business, I was doing a lot of consulting work in the spirit space and the alcohol space. About 50% of my work was for people like Diageo, Bacardi, Campari, helping them to develop new brands, reposition existing brands, and create and understand where the new opportunities were.
Yeah.
And when I wasn't doing spirits work, I was doing a lot of work in what I might call sort of more female-driven industries like fashion, beauty, and personal care. So I became somewhat of an expert in gender dynamics in marketing. And so when coming to the spirit space, recognizing that there is this very empowered consumer. Women do like to drink spirits and cocktails, and yet everything I was hearing internally was that women were really not the focus, and that actually women don't like spirits, they like wine, and they buy brands that men buy for them. And it seemed very outdated and not what I was hearing from the women that I was talking to. So I'd sort of set off on this journey to understand, first of all, just academically why this was, right? So why are there no or so few spirit brands that really take women seriously? And if we were to take women seriously, what should spirit brands look like that do that? And at some point, as a consultant, you always sort of think, well, maybe the reason why no one's doing this well, is because there are not enough women behind the scenes. And I eventually sort of came to the conclusion, somewhat naively, that I'm just going to have to do this myself. And that was where I was in 2015. And 2 years of research and development later, I launched Pomp and Whimsy in 2017.
Quite a journey, because you never set out, or at least that wasn't when you were doing this business pre 2008 and the financial crisis, that you were going to go and be a business owner, right? That was
right.
not
Yeah.
overnight. As you mentioned, you're now a business owner, and through that you saw this huge need. Why? And so we're going to get to the Pomp and Whimsy journey, but why gin?
Yeah. So this everything started and ended with the consumer, right? So everything I've done, the red thread that follows through all of it is going back to real people and going back to the end consumer. And so I started really just by asking my target audience, well, what do you want? What's missing? How are companies getting it wrong, and what should they be doing? And it started as a very kind of blue skies conversation around what would your ideal white spirit look like? And after going across the country and doing lots and lots of focus groups and interviews, which is kind of what I do, my background is, I started very quickly to hear some very consistent things coming back. So women describing to me the idea of a very lightly botanically infused white spirit that they could sip straight. The flavored vodkas at the time were artificial, and they weren't nice by themselves, and there was a frustration that they were unsophisticated. And so women were really looking for this more sophisticated spirit that they could sip straight, but they could mix lightly with bubbles and use in the base of a cocktail. And at this point in the conversation, I'd always sort of say to them, well, what you're describing there is gin. That's essentially what gin is. Gin is a lightly botanically infused spirit that is amazing with bubbles and is the base of more cocktails than any other spirit. At which point people would say,
not the gin I know.
I didn't know, gin tastes like Christmas trees, or I had a really bad experience with it in college, or I don't like tonic. And I realized that there's a cognitive dissonance going on between the way gin sounds like as a concept and the way, if you didn't know anything about it but that, it doesn't taste necessarily like that. So in the beginning, I set out to create what I thought women had in mind when they were describing, or I was describing the idea of gin to them. And then the second part of that story is then mapping that onto the history of gin and where gin comes from as a spirit and women's role in that.
Okay, now I know this, and again, full disclosure, I'm a proud investor and proud advisor to Pomp and Whimsy. And when Nicola and I first met, she came to Luminary here in New York. This is way pre-pandemic, and said, I brought some of our try. And I said, oh, no. I want to support you because you're a woman and you have a great business, but I'm not a gin drinker. And it was 10 o'clock in the morning, by the way. And I don't really want to try this. Yeah. And I fell in love because, to your point, it wasn't the gin that I was thinking of, my college gin, right? And how sophisticated it became. But you decided, I'm going to do this. But there's history there that most people don't understand, and the tie with women and why this became so relevant for you as the business owner.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, you're absolutely like my ideal consumer, right? In that you enjoy spirits, you enjoy cocktails, you have a sophisticated palate, but you have this sort of association with this spirit not being something that's for you. And so being able to open your eyes and show you that we've actually created this exactly for you. It's just, I never tire of those moments, whether they're 10 a.m. in the morning or 10 p.m. at night. But yeah, so after sort of really understanding what women were looking for from gin today, it was time to really tie this into what gin is and has always been. So not many people know this. I know that for me growing up, I knew the phrase mother's ruin as like slang for gin, but never really understood where that came from. And the more I dug into the history, I realized that actually before gin was called mother's ruin, which we can get into, but was very much a propaganda campaign to stop women were having newfound freedom and sense of empowerment around drinking and spirits. Before that, gin was called mother gin, right? So very, very different connotation. And so what I discovered, the more I sort of learned about the history of gin, is that gin, the popularity of gin was actually started by a queen. So Queen Mary II in the UK was married to King William of Orange of Holland. And when they ascended to the throne in the UK, she brought gin to the royal courts. And that's where it really took off in popularity and became like the spirit of England. So it went from Queen Gin to Mother Gin. It took a dive down into Mother's Ruin, and we're bringing it back up again. So what we wanted to learn was not just this history, but also, well, if women were into gin, how were they drinking it then? And what we learned is that the way people drank gin then is very different to our associations with the gin and tonic and the martini and so on. They were adding sugar to their gin and bitters. So like making an old fashioned essentially. And for those people who were not mixing their own old fashions, they were buying what we might now call ready prepared or ready to drink gin cordials. So these were gins that had been infused and flavored. And women were serving these at their tea parties and their ladies' luncheons and so on. So it felt like there was an opportunity to bring back this lost style and update it for a modern palate and modern mixology and so on. But in so doing, to bring women back into the story and bring back Mother Gin, essentially.
Your experience, Nicola, and your background really lends itself to what you're doing now as far as storytelling and understanding why a brand like this can have an impact, why it touches, particularly women as consumers. But by the way, men drink this too, and it's phenomenal. One of the things that we hear so little about, I think there's probably a handful, if any, is women in spirits, right? Women that are changing the game in spirits, women that are taking risks in building companies within spirits. And you and I've talked about this. The one everyone knows is Bethany Frankel and Skinny Girl. But why is this such an issue? And why are you, in addition to building and running this company, sort of the thought leader, the trailblazer, the voice of the platform around women in spirits?
Yeah, well, alcohol in general is a vice industry. And so there's always been I would say, socially constructed negative image around women and alcohol. So, if you go back to the temperance movement, and again, going back a century or more before that, the gin craze and Mother's Ruin and so on, creating these sort of stories about the polluting effect of alcohol on women as mothers and the taking away or detracting from their virtue and so on. And so for the longest time in the US especially, women weren't even allowed in bars. And those women who were in bars were either prostitutes or viewed as, morally loose and available. And so there's always been this kind of slightly dirty veneer about women in spirits, and as a result, it's always been kind of seen as like a man's world and a man's industry. But of course, it's the same with any other industry, where if you just have the same people creating the same things for the same audience, eventually, there's no innovation there. And so I do think that the industry is really trying hard right now to become more diverse in every sense of the word. And part of this is just the recognition that will get better. 70% of household spending on alcohol. So there's a lot of money being left on the table quite silly from not taking it seriously. So there's a social imperative, but there's also an economic opportunity there.
A huge economic opportunity, right? A huge economic opportunity. And you're now seeing, and one of the things that you created even, well into to Pop and Whimsy was the Women's Cocktail Collective, which is, let's not compete because there are so few of us and there are more, but let's collaborate and actually prop each other up so that people are buying from us that know other spirits that are out there, wine and beer, that are being built and founded and led by women.
Yes, I think that, I think you and I have similar philosophies around this, which is that, you can't own women owned, right? And you shouldn't try. And the best way that you can help women more generally is by creating the tide that will lift all of those ships together. And so, rather than me sort of thinking of myself as a pioneer or a trailblazer, I certainly was not the first woman to own a company in the US, but I found community in the other women who are doing what I was doing, and especially the women who had come before me, women who were much further along, who were at the similar stage in the journey. And I realized that very early on that the value in that community was so much if we came together and didn't view ourselves as, I'm going to be the women trailblazer here, because the point is we want to get away from being the one in the room, the one person in the room. And then more importantly, we, again, coming back to this sort of economic opportunity here, we were finding as we were going into bars and restaurants and stores that there was an interest among the buyers, obviously being prompted by the interest in their customers, for women-owned spirits. And it's in general, and a lack of awareness about how to even go about finding out which ones those were. And so the sort of was, what if we could bring them out into Hamid and show them actually you're looking to women-made or women-founded companies. Here it is. We'll bring it to you. Here's the community. Let's make this really easy. So that was sort of the impetus behind it. But we found value there in being able to cross-promote and pooling our resources. But we've also, through the ups and the downs of the last sort of 24 months, really found that sort of support in the community as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the ups and the downs, especially the last 12 months. And I would say, one of the things that is so mission aligned with the Women's Cocktail Collective and Nicola, what you're doing with Pop and Whimsy is why I think the Luminary connection, right? It's this community of women and men. It's this community of raising each other up, no matter what you do, right? No matter what your professional journey is. And it is so important that we as a collective understand we're so much more powerful together. Making room for others at the table, but also creating your own space at that table is so important. But a year ago, more than a year ago, no one could have predicted where we're at today. Your brand, company, as you just walk us through where that you've adapted to the landscape. You've actually had tremendous growth this past year. So how did you manage through that? How and where do you see the business growing over the next couple of years? Oh, I think we lost you. You're frozen. So Nicola, if you can hear us, sorry, this is what happens when you've got everyone on technical difficulties. Can you hear us, Nicola? Okay, we are frozen. So I'm actually going to tell you a little bit about the journey while Nicola is hopefully can reconnect. So as I mentioned, I'm an advisor and an investor, and one of the things that I saw Pop and Whimsy do from the very beginning. Oh, there we are. You're back. Okay. Yes. Tell us about this past year. I was just about to go launch into my spiel about what I know, but now I have you back. You say
yes. Yes, sorry about that. We dropped the connection for a second there. So obviously 2020 has been an incredibly difficult year for anyone in or related to the hospitality industry. So the shutdowns that happened in March last year had a serious impact. And much as overall, yes, we all saw the reports and probably experienced personally that we were drinking at home and maybe drinking more than we had before. So many new brands really rely on the bar and restaurant industry as the first sort of route to market. And so with that taken away, it's very difficult to get that trial. Trial is so important when you're in the food and beverage industry in general. And so overall, the craft spirit industry saw a big decline last year, 55% overall decline in revenues across the industry. So when we all saw the writing on the wall in March 16th or whenever it was that official New York City shutdown happened, I think the first thing that we did was come together and say, hell no. This is not happening to us. This will not happen. What we have here is too good. And more importantly, even though the venue for drinking has gone away, that we knew that there's no prohibition in history that has stopped people from drinking. In fact, in every prohibition, drinking has always increased. So we knew that where there was a will, there is a way, and that our consumer would not go anywhere. So it really just became about, first of all, how could we communicate with her in a way that was relevant and sensitive to the situation? And we focus a lot on how our consumer is a host and how she uses the cocktail as a way to engage and connect with other people. And of course, we took that online, and we took it into smaller hosting backyard occasions and things like that. From the point of view of the route to market, obviously bringing that online too, as well as accelerating our plans to launch in retail, because the grocery store was actually one of the only places you could go to during a pandemic where you kind of knew where everything was and some sense of normality. So, we knew she would still be there and there would be a place to find her there. And so as a result, we ended the year 100% up, actually, which was way below the business plan that we'd set for ourselves at the beginning of the year, but way above the reality check that we gave ourselves in March. So I was very, very proud with how my team hustled and got us through last year.
We hear so much about this industry and obviously the devastation, particularly with restaurants and spirits, but you really came out swinging, right? And said, we're not going down. We have too good of a thing. I know we're right. I know we have a fantastic product. And that flip of we're going to invest from that retail to online, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I say retail, I mean in the bars and restaurants, but you went full on online, right? DTC. And then this idea of getting in these grocery stores, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take for you to say we've got to kind of flip the script here and I don't like the word pivot because none of your model changed. It was you just added new opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I think that you can see from our numbers last year that Q2 was completely flat, right? So Q2 was when the main kind of wreckage of the pandemic really hit the business, but that was also the period at which we furiously put in place a broader plan, as you said, or an expanded plan. And by the time we got to Q4 was 4 times up on Q4 in 2019. So it took 3 to 6 months, but now we're actually back on the same business plan. We're accelerating extremely fast, and we went from at the beginning of 2020 starting a fundraising round and then having to more or less abandon that round because all of the investors said, well, we'll see you next year, right? We'll see if you're still here, to actually oversubscribing that round and successfully closing it. So it was a complete turnaround.
And that in itself, right? In fundraising as a woman in spirits, in itself is a feat, right? We know this. but you did it successfully in the midst of a pandemic. And we won't get into all the details yet of the raise. But what was it that your investors saw, the additional investors that saw in this round that said, we've got to get behind this brand and this product?
Well, I think what's interesting about any kind of crisis is that it creates a shakedown of the market, and I think that it really proves your ability. If you can navigate through this as a leader and as a brand, then you should be able to navigate through anything, right? And so I think that our investors, everybody, most of the people who invested we'd previously started a conversation with them at the beginning of the pandemic. We kept in touch with them during the pandemic, and as we started to really show the results, they were actually quite quick to come back to the conversation, and especially seeing how so many of our peers in the industry had not successfully pivoted creatively, reworked their business plans. It was easy to show actually how we were streets ahead of everybody else. I think it actually gave us quite a big competitive edge at looking back on it.
Well, I completely agree. And I think, I have this song on repeat, I'm Still Standing by Elton John. And because you're still standing, right? We're still standing. We didn't let this pandemic deficit the business, and you've kept going. That's a business. Personally, emotionally, as the co-founder, as the CEO, how have you navigated through this, Nicola? Oh, I think we lost her again. Let's see if she comes back. Did you hear my question, Nicola? Apologies, everyone watching, listening. It's just this is the reality of internet and technology. Are you still there? Oh, okay. She'll probably pop back on for the last 2 minutes. But I will tell you, one of the things that Nicola did so incredibly well this past year was reach out and stay in touch. There she is. Sorry, this is just the technology of the world. Don't worry. What the question, if you didn't hear me, was, Nicola, how, right? You've as a business owner, as a founder, you've navigated. Your team's incredible, but personally, what have you done to keep yourself moving forward, to keep yourself sane?
That's a really good question. I think that for me, over the last kind of 12 months, and I'm sure I'm not unique in this, I've focused on the things that I can affect and the things that I can control, because there's been so much that's out of all of our control, right? Yes. And, we all would have gone crazy if we focus too much on those things. So I kept myself, and most importantly my team, very focused on the things that were within their power to control. We also broke down the goals into, sometimes daily goals, daily goals, weekly goals. We stopped trying to think about everything from a 6-month, 12-month, 2-year point of view, and instead recognize that, in a month's time, things are going to look different again. So let's just focus on what we can do now.
And I think one of the things that I'm very impressed by is that you are very direct, you're very open, you're very candid. We spent a year, we just saw each other in person for the first time in over a year today, but we kept in contact, right?
Yes.
Tapping into your communities, tapping into your networks and your relationships in the good times and the bad is so important, whether you're a founder or you're a working mom or you're just trying to get through this. And I think you did that pretty masterfully, just saying, here's what I need, right? Where can you help? Where can I help?
Right. And I think one of the things that you were also awesome for is you force me and other women in general to celebrate when we do have a win. And, I think that we often as women don't want to come off as, like, yes, braggy, and you're the person to say, you absolutely need to celebrate this right now. And we need that. We actually need those people that we can celebrate with as much as we need those people that we can commiserate with. So thank you for being both of those people to me.
Well, likewise, right? I mean, we both run challenging businesses and challenging times, and I think that is so important. And whether you're running a business or not, whether you're sitting in corporate America, you're a teacher, it doesn't matter. This has been challenging for everyone, and so how you really lean into the communities that you're a part of, and I'm proud that you're part of us. I want to tell everyone, I have been putting in the chat where to find you on Instagram, but just so people know, where can they find you? Where can they buy from you?
Yes, so obviously you can find us online. Only I see we have someone watching from Singapore. You won't be able to find us in Singapore, unfortunately, yet. But you can find us on shop.pompandwhimsy.com, and we deliver to 33 states. If you are in the 13 states in which we have physical distribution, you're going to find us in places like Total Wine and Bevmo. Shortly, you'll be seeing us in Whole Foods, and of course, support your local independent retailers as well. And feel free to, if you don't see us on shelf, to ask for us, because most retailers want to find out about new brands, and that's a great way to make that happen.
Yes. So if you're local and you're in the United States, please ask. And it's amazing what asking your local wine or liquor store what they have and don't have, and they actually listen. They want to buy. So, well, Nicola, thank you so much. And as I mentioned earlier, Nicola's sitting at the glass ceiling, which is our rooftop lounge. One of the things that Nicola and I have been talking about for over a year, more than that, is that when the glass ceiling opens next Friday, 30th, we'll be able to shop from women-owned spirits and wine and beer companies. So you as the consumer can make the decision around where you want to put your money. And we're so excited that Pomp and Whimsy will be one of our incredible partners. And just look forward to seeing more gin on the shelves and everything that Pomp and Whimsy is going to be doing in the future. So thank you for coming today.
Many, many more toasts to come, Cate.
Exactly. Yeah. Can't wait. And we'll see you later. Thanks, Nicola.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right. And we are back to back today. We have another guest today, Melissa Blatt, who is the founder and CEO of Indie Pop. I did see her pop in a little bit earlier. We don't seem to have her yet. So I am going to log off and log back on. If you're still watching, hopefully you'll come back and hear Melissa. She has created an incredible business around healthcare options for freelancers, small business owners, solopreneurs. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day if you can tune in.